I was one time at an outdoor patio for a coffee house, and I overheard a conversation. First person said, "Are you listening to me?" Second person said, Yeah. No, I mean, are you really hearing me? Huh? Would you put your phone down and pay attention to what I'm saying? Now, technically, that second person was telling the truth. I mean, the ways that we use this word hear or listen. Yes, sound waves reverberated in his eardrum, and it sent those little bones in the inner ear oscillating, stimulating the cochlear nerve that sent signals into the brain. He heard, but then didn't really take it in. Wasn't really awake to the message, certainly wasn't acting upon the message that was given. And we've all been there, yes? And there's sometimes in our lives where there might have been some kind of message coming our way, maybe different sources, different times, and we didn't really hear it. It reverberated in eardrums, or we saw words on a page, but we really didn't take it in. But then there was a moment where it broke through, where we got it. And we tend to call those moments epiphanies, or awakenings, or aha moments. Have you ever had them? Yeah. Maybe someone or someones were telling you about a unique gift you had to share over and over again, and you just brushed it off, but then one day there was the, wait a minute, maybe this is true about me. Or on the other polarity, people reflected a pattern of behavior that was not healthy, and finally you got it and began to take action or do some work around it. We have those experiences where we might have heard on one level, but then finally we really heard. The breakthrough, the aha, the epiphanies. Have you had anything like that lately? I invite you to consider when we talk about relationship with God or connection with Spirit. In the UCC, we say God is still speaking. So there's somehow an idea that we might, in different points and times, hear something about who we are or receive some sense of call or nudging about something we're supposed to do. Have you heard something like that, had something like that kind of breakthrough lately? And if not, why do you suppose that is? I one time did an informal conversational survey, so small sample, but I was asking and having these conversations with folks, getting a sense of where people were. And when I talked to people about, have you ever had those times of the breakthrough, the aha, the awakening, the epiphany, almost everyone said, oh yeah, and maybe shared a story. And then when I asked, have you had anything like that recently? Most people said, not so recently. And then when I asked that question, why do you suppose that is? A portion of the people I was talking with seemed surprised by the question. Well, what do you mean? They had the sense that any epiphanies or awakening or hearing, that they did not have agency in that or participation, and kind of a picture that those sorts of things come when the universe or God or whatever you call it just kind of whacks you upside the head every now and then. And then there were other people who did for themselves had a sense that they could be participants. You can't force an awakening or an epiphany, but you can do things to be open to it. So they had ideas of disciplines or practices or things that they did. But then those folks said, well, the why for them was because they hadn't been doing it lately, that they were busy or distracted or something like that. And so then we drilled down a little bit in those conversations about, well, why do you suppose? Because if there's this idea that somehow God might offer messages, the creator of the universe who wants ultimately what's good for us and for the world, if there's somehow a way to access that or receive that, why wouldn't that be the top priority? And so they talked about, pondered and wrestled with, and then we came up with the most primary reason was fear. Because if we really hear something that's an awakening or an epiphany, it changes things. Sometimes it can change everything. And so there can be an unconscious even resistance to taking in that kind of message or awakenings or ahas. And I imagine that's pretty common among human beings, and it's not a modern phenomenon. It goes back, and that's why we have so many passages or stories about encouraging us to awaken or listen or open to how God might still be speaking. And our psalmist this morning singing a song about God still speaking, that God doesn't quit or give up on us even if we're resistant or afraid. The messages keep on coming. And the psalmist says God's broadcasting on numerous channels. So as you heard, starts out with the heavens declare the glory of God, and earth proclaims God's handiwork. God speaking, God revealed in the beauty of creation. And I know many of us, because you've talked to me about it, have experienced the divine or some sense of something more in those ways. The sun rises and the sun sets here. Oh my. Glorious. Mountain vistas, reflections, rainbows. And I'm sure wherever you are, you've got pretty things there too. But we experience something that is inviting us into something bigger, something more. But at the same time, the psalmist says that's not the whole story. That's not all God has to say. And I think of that beauty as we might call it God's calling card. Because, for example, it doesn't matter how pretty the sunset is, most people aren't going to be challenged in their addictive behavior by the sunset. Or how glorious the mountain vista is doesn't often get people asking, am I a white supremacist? Right? So that's not the whole deal. There's more. So the psalmist talks about another channel, if you will. Talks about, the word is Torah. Talks about Torah, we'd call scripture. But think of any really sacred writings or inspirational writings, stories that have come from other people. And the psalmist is talking about the songs and the poems and the commandments and all of that. And there's this idea that there's others who've wrestled with or tried to listen. And doesn't mean they always got it right, but they've done their best and they're sharing their experience, their strength, their hope, their struggle. And that when we pay attention to those stories, those writings, that we might hear how God can be speaking into our own time and place. That there can be awakening or understanding that comes from that. But then that's not all there is either. I think there's those old late night TV commercials. Wait, there's more. That's back when we had broadcast television or 3 channels and there wasn't much to watch at night. Wait, there's more, and that is, in 12-step recovery circles, it gets called conscious contact with God, but the experience of God in a more direct way. So there's the beauty of creation, there's the stories, these written words, poetry and song, but also what we call prayer. But the idea of prayer for the psalmist isn't just talking at God, but there's a sense of listening. And the psalmist starts praying in the psalm itself. And God, I'm paying attention to those scriptures, those words, but God knows if I'm really getting it right. I have my own filters, so help put me on the right path. Help me know the right way to go, the right track. And let me meditate on this. Let me receive this. So there's this idea of a more direct kind of listening. What we might call contemplation or meditation or centering prayer, but there's these ways of being present to what is, and things can emerge. And there's this understanding, the whole reason the psalmist is talking about that, and why Israel put this in their hymnal, because that's what the Psalms are, it's the hymnal of Israel, is an invitation to all of us, because it is a struggle to listen, to stay open. So a reminder in this song. And Jesus is talking about the same idea as well in our Gospel of Luke's story. As Steve was mentioning in the introduction, this is the beginning of Jesus' ministry in the Gospel of Luke version of his story. And he goes to his hometown synagogue. So for you, if you had a home church, home faith community, gone back there, and the things that he does there are more typical of how people might offer some respect to someone seen as a rabbi, which fits other parts of the story. But he's come there, and they hand him the scroll of the day to read. So there's a cycle of readings in the Jewish year. Christian cycles are based on that idea. So he's handed the scroll, and the idea is often that a rabbi, a teacher, would read from the scroll and then offer some kind of interpretation or understanding. And it was an itinerant thing. for most. You'd visit different places and be invited if you were seen as someone who might offer a word, so to speak. So this is what's going on in the story. Jesus handed the scroll and he reads from Isaiah, that's the scroll. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for God has anointed me to bring good news to the poor, release to the captives, to bring insight for those who are not seeing, to declare the year of the Lord's favor, which was a year of jubilee, economic justice. This is the word that Jesus is sharing and proclaiming. And to the people in Nazareth, a sort of dusty, not important place, it's probably sounding like, poor? Ooh, me. Economic justice? Sounds good. So they would hear that as good news. And then Jesus says, these words are fulfilled in your hearing. Now, as we hear that, we might think, wait, fulfilled? Jesus, have you seen my news feed on my phone? Or for some of us, the print paper in my driveway? Lots of injustice, lots of oppression, lots of bondage, lots of lack of insight. These words have not been fulfilled. It's been 2,000 years since you spoke them. What's up, Jesus? Then in dialogue with the story, we might notice, oh wait, Jesus didn't say the words are fulfilled in his speaking them. He said the words are fulfilled in your hearing. So this is not magic Jesus saying abracadabra and made the world better. He says the words are fulfilled in your hearing. And in the language, the religious language of Jesus, Hebrew, the word that's in view here is Shema. Shema. And we've talked about it before. I'm going to invite you, little Mr. Rogers, I like to do this. Can you say Shema with me? Shema, Shema, Shema. And it's really, even in modern Judaism, a central word in worship. And when Jesus is asked, what's the greatest commandment later, he says, the first word out of his mouth, Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. You shall love the Lord your God with, some of you have heard the rest of that. But Shema. And Shema, unlike that English word hear or listen, where it could be about my eardrum and also about my comprehension, Shema is never just eardrum level, or I saw the word on the page level. The word Shema means I have soaked in it. I am taking it in so it becomes part of me and influences and empowers my action. So we have to say, like, really hear, right? But Shema, that's what it means. It's a bit like last week in the story where there was this juxtaposition between, we might call it religious practice or understanding that's just on the surface, a little washing, versus drinking. Taking in the wine, but what we receive and take into ourselves becomes part of us. Shema is this level of listening where it becomes part of us. And so Jesus is saying these words, these Isaiah words, which already were really old then, they're fulfilled when we actually soak in them, receive them, digest them. They become part of us, and then we live them. That's what fulfills the word. Not that one person spoke them or someone wrote them. It's communities, it's people receiving them and then embodying them in the world. And the whole ministry of Jesus is about helping people follow him to learn how to do that and live that. Whether it's at meal at table or listening prayer early in the morning or worship in the synagogue, conversations about the scripture, but it's all the channels God's broadcasting on, and Jesus says, come follow me, and we're going to listen together. We're going to soak in it. We're going to receive it so we can embody this word. The world that we're yearning for, we make it happen because we take it in and we live it. By God's power, God's Spirit, God's word in us. Now, there's all kinds of questions that any of this raises, and I acknowledge them, but can't talk about all of them here and now. There's more to come. But one question I know always is, well, how do I know if it's God? Legit question, yes? Because every time, if we really do sit down and try to listen, meditation, contemplation, there's a whole committee of voices that's there. And so that's a reality. But I do believe and understand there are ways that we can be helped and guided in discerning the voices. And I've led retreats that are about that. And I want to, give honor to someone who taught me both about how to listen, and I went on retreats and learned how to do retreats like that, and it was the Reverend Bruce Van Blair. who passed away on Friday. And he's a pastor I worked with at the Congregational Church on Mercer Island, and he made a transformative difference in my life because he's one of the people who helped me how to listen and to help other people know how to listen. I also, a friend of mine, Nathaniel Vicia, some of you met him virtually. You did the Chaos in the Kingdom. He's just started a blog site called the Listening Prayer Project, the Listening Prayer Project. And he's very playful and down to earth, but that might be another resource. So I'm commending some resources to you. And I put the link in the bulletin. It'll also be in the Tidings newsletter. And that's some of the books I'm going to drag out onto the plaza. They're about listening and contemplation. And from whether it's a Japanese Christian or a Buddhist meditator or other Christian Quaker resource, I got a very small collection, but that will be out there. Because we do need help. And there are resources, and it's not something that most of us just know how to do. I grew up in the church, went to seminary. I didn't know anything about listening. It was not the focus. But I can bear witness to that it has changed everything for me. Learning to listen and practicing listening, hearing Shema level has changed everything for me. Not easy. Sometimes, well, a lot of times scary, because it often challenges some of my basic assumptions or ways I feel comfortable living or being. And I can really think of lots of examples, but the one that came and emerged for me this week, I know is because my son just visited with me over the holidays. His name is Joshua. He's 23. He lives in Washington, D.C. And he's our only child. And there almost was not a Joshua. Because for me, I grew up, without going into the whole story, but I grew up, especially my early childhood, I did not have a father in any good sense of the word. And by the time then I have gotten married, and for a lot of people, it's just like you start having kids. There's no question. There was for me. Because I was concerned that I had no good model of how to be a father. And I was afraid. And I remember saying to a spiritual director at the time, I said, I don't want to mess him up. Said that fact is going to do well that you even raise that question. Lots of parents never even worry about that. But I was afraid. I didn't want to mess a child up. But by that point in my life, I had learned to listen. And whether it was the glory of creation, at that time I was in the Pacific Northwest, there's a lot of glory of creation in the Pacific Northwest that would remind me to pay attention. I had, by that point, had a practice of studying some portion of the scriptures each day. Not because it was some magic something, but because it offered the stories and the songs and the poems would speak to challenging me in places of my fear, inviting me into broader vision. And I'd learned prayer journaling and listening prayer and mentors and community of people that helped me here. And I heard, Michael, don't be afraid. And I heard, and that's not, so by the way, just to be clear, my journeying about parenting is not something applied to everyone. It was just about me. And that's that part of like the specific, the praying part about listening. And so I said yes. That there was somehow, and I wasn't sure about it, like I might have gifts for it. And unto us a child was born, a son was given. And I will tell you, I learned more about myself by being a father. And I discovered gifts I never would have known I had. Like if this were my last day and someone said, what are you most pleased with about your life? I feel most confident about the father that I have been and the gifts I've given to my son. And it's because I learned to listen. And I heard a word greater than my fear. And it wasn't, by the way, just once. All that parenting, daily listening, a regular practice. We are invited to be part of what is creative and beautiful and life-giving and healing. Good news for the poor, oppressed going free, economic justice, racial equality. Love for all people, no matter who they are or where they are in life's journey. These words, these images, they are fulfilled in our hearing every day. Jesus shows us the way. Come and see. Amen.